Thank you for joining us for another Partner Go and Grow MSP webinar. My name is Evaldas Volunas. I'm Cybersecurity Product Manager here at Hermitage Solution, and I will be the host for today's webinar. So today's topic is MSP made simple with scale computing, and we have two guests from Scale. So it's Jaco Delport, he's a regional sales manager, and William van Kolenburg, he's a sales engineer. So they'll present more about the scale computing. So just before we start, a few important reminders. Yeah, this webinar is being recorded, and recording will be available within a few days. So also you are muted, and if you have any questions, you can always write down these questions into chat, and we'll address these questions during the Q&A session. Or of course, you can ask these questions during Q&A. So this is it from my side, and gentlemen, it's your time.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you very much everybody for joining. I think it's afternoon that side everywhere now currently, right? It's not the morning yet anymore, right? So let's talk about scale computing and what we can offer as a hyper-converged infrastructure. We talk about the term simplicity very loosely, and when we talk about simplicity in the IT infrastructure market, the term simplicity doesn't always fit everywhere. And when you think about IT infrastructure, when you think about the term simple, we like to really embody that term and make it part of our DNA. And as we talk about the solution about scale computing in depth, you'll see that we talk a lot about simplicity, because this platform really is that easy. And if we compare this to, for instance, VMware and Nutanix and those competitors out in the market. VMware, for example, has got about 148 certifications. Nutanix, they've got multiple levels of certification to get to the top level engineering certification. With scale computing, got about a 1-hour training video to get through to a management type of certification to be able to manage our platform. Well, at the end of our demo, which William will do at the end of this presentation, you'll almost be as good as certified, and you'll quickly pass through that training video, that 1-hour training video that we've got online. So when we think about infrastructure, think about electricity, right? When you get into your office, when you get into your building and you switch on your electricity, it's there, the lights go on. You don't think about how that electricity is delivered to your house or to your office. It's a means to an end. It's there, it's available, right? And that's how we see infrastructure. Something that's simple, something that's easy to use, something that's always there and available. You switch it on, it's there, ready to create virtual machines and applications. And that's great for MSPs, something to deliver to your customers, something that's always available, something that's easy to deliver to your customers, something that's really easy to manage. Let me tell you a bit more about scale computing. William, can you confirm, is my presentation moving? I just paused my screen, so I don't know if it unpaused.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is.
Good, great. Right, so scale computing, who are we? We provide solutions for the distributed enterprise, small, mid-market IT, and we're currently also the leader in the SMB infrastructure market, powered by about 24 patents in the United States. And again, like I said a bit earlier, it's in our DNA, simplicity, radically simplified management with a high availability built in. Comprehensive support, William will touch in on that as well within the demo, and you'll see how that works and integrates with our system. Comprehensive support, 24/7 support in-house by our own engineers, and it's not outsourced to a call center somewhere. You speak to guys that work with our product that's employed by Scale. We're across multiple industries: retail, healthcare, education, financial services, manufacturing, government, just to name a few. And we've got our headquarters in the United States, Indianapolis, and our development or R&D team in San Francisco. And we've also got our EMEA headquarters with sales offices in Germany, South Africa, and the United Kingdom. We've got about 3,000 plus clusters deployed worldwide, about 10,000 systems, and a net promoter score of 91. And for those who don't know what NPS stands for, it's the willingness of a customer to recommend us to other customers. And then also a few technology partners, Lenovo, Google Cloud to provide a cloud breakup or DR in the cloud type of infrastructure, APC Schneider, micro data center in a box type of solution, and also with Intel to provide our NVMe-based boxes. Then we've also partnered with Acronis and Leostream. Acronis to provide that extra layer of protection and backup features with our platform, and also Leostream to provide additional VDI solutions to our platform, which is really complementary to our product. And also then with Intel, we'll touch on this as well, for the world's smallest hyper-converged appliance, literally a device that fits in the palm of your hand that runs virtual machines. Great for the edge deployment, great for MSPs that's got smaller customers with little workloads on the edge, maybe replicating to your hosted infrastructure within your environment. Right. So just to talk about scale computing, we're not a young company. We've been around the block. We started in about 2008 as a storage provider, and we looked around how we wanted to develop hyper-converged as a platform, and we looked at KVM as our hypervisor to develop our hyper-converged platform, our HE3 hyper-converged platform. And we started that journey in 2010, and in 2012 we launched our HE3 hyper-converged platform. And also just an interesting fact that gets overlooked a lot of times, in 2013 Google launched their Google Compute Engine with KVM as their primary hypervisor to deliver virtual machines to the market. And in 2015 Apple saved around $30 million annually by dropping VMware in favor of KVM. And as we proceeded and we started growing, in 2015, we became the #1 KVM-based HCI vendor globally. And in 2017, we started our journey with Lenovo to provide our back-end hardware as well, but also a route to market or OEM distributed model within the market. And in 2017, we launched at Google with the Google Cloud Unity to provide this DR in the cloud strategy. And in 2018, that's when we launched Edge for edge computing. Now, when you think about the edge, that's everything at the edge of your network, whether it be a multi-site deployment, whether you've got a nice customer of ours got ships running in the ocean. So every ship's got a little cluster running on the ships, right? That's the edge of your network. That's where the workload needs to be, on the edge. That's where the data resides, right? They need the compute to be on each and every ship, and that's considered the edge. Right. Let's talk about a few customers that we've got in our region currently. There we go. Sorry, guys. Lava Mac, eh? When you click too fast, everything just moves. When you look at Europe, just mentioned a few. Northern Marine currently running. It's basically ships, got clusters running on each and every ship. Telford Offshore, also ships running scale computing clusters. And then Ahol Dalhaize, 1,000 store deployment, running scale computing clusters. I mentioned these why? Because when you think about ships and supermarket stores, there's not a lot of IT skills within these stores, right? And they're looking for something that's high available, easy to use, simple to deploy, and doesn't really require a lot of physical intervention on the site. And this is where scale computing solved a lot of these challenges for them, to make things easier to deploy, high available, and basically easier to manage. And like our VP of EMEA always said, there's no IT knowledge between an apple and a banana, right? And then further to that, a lot more customers, Genting Casinos, South Africa, one of my big customers, Coca-Cola Beverages Africa, Prosperity Health, Vulcan Hospital, Capital Bank of Mozambique. So a lot of good companies, brands running our scale computing clusters across the Middle European EMEA market. Right. So what does the market have to say about scale computing? So if we look at Gartner, on an overall, we're the most highly rated and most widely reviewed HCI solution online. And on overall ratings of our product, whether it be our product capabilities, customer satisfaction, how we deploy our product, overall, we rate higher than our competitors out there in the market. and with also the most case studies published worldwide. And we're also a very highly rated solution out there in the market. But also, recently, we've been awarded the Gartner Peer Insight Customer Choice Award alongside Dell EMC and VMware. Not VMware, Nutanix for 2021. And we've got a 95% customer rating, rating that would recommend us to other customers on the Gartner Peer Insights website. Right. And then just also for our journey with the CRN Awards, 2019, we won the Hyper-Converged Infrastructure Award, as well as 2020. And then also in 2020, we scooped up the newly created Edge Computing category. And then in 2021, we also scooped up the Edge Computing and Hyper-Converged Award for the 3rd year running. Right. So let's talk about MSPs and how scale computing can benefit MSPs. So for managed service provider, then perhaps 3 ways of looking at this and how MSPs can deploy scale computing. So they can run it as a disaster recovery as a service, which is an ideal model for HE3 as a managed service offering, where the customers own and manage their own HE3 systems, or use it as an MSP for hosting or remote management. The MSP can provide a managed recovery services to these customers. In a disaster recovery as a service model, the MSP owns the centralized DR infrastructure and manages the DR planning and execution in the event of the disaster. So if there's something happening with the customer's on-site equipment, that DR can be managed, spun up, or recovered directly to the customer's site from the actual infrastructure hosted by the MSP itself. And the MSP can deploy low-cost hardware systems to allow for the service to be offered at a lower monthly subscription rates to create it predictable and also manage their cash flow. The second option can be RMM, remote management model. Right? In the RMM model, the customer owns or leases the HE3 system and hosts it locally within their data center. And the MSP provides RMM as a service with the option for additional services. And those services may include the implementation services, with the initial configuration and setup of the HE3 system at the customer site, right? And these may include pre-stage configuration before delivery. So the customer, you as a MSP might configure the scale clusters within your offices and deliver that pre-configured and pre-staged clusters to the customer's data center. Or alternatively, you can assist with that scale out of the customer's HE3 system at the customer site. Or you can provide migration services, transfer of the application workloads to the HE3 system, whether it be physical to virtual or virtual to virtual, right? And also disaster recovery services with the optional configuration of the disaster recovery to a second disaster recovery site, or DRAS, which is back to the first option here, right? Or thirdly, you can do an infrastructure as a service model where the MSP basically owns the actual service. So you run it as a cloud service, right? And in the infrastructure as a service model, the HE3 system is owned or leased by the MSP rather than the end user. And the HE3 system is hosted and managed by the MSP. The HE3 system may be shared and repurposed between end customers. And as the infrastructure as a service, the primary service can be infrastructure hosted with additional services as scale out services, increasing the customer's hosted or on-site infrastructure capacity, migration services. You can transfer of application workloads to the HE3 system as well. So again, physical to virtual, virtual to virtual, right? Disaster recovery services, again, back to the first one that you can offer, optional configuration of the disaster recovery to disaster recovery site. Okay. So what do you get from a scale computing infrastructure, but from a software perspective? And again, like we mentioned this before, you get simplicity. right? Unified management, pre-configured storage, deploys in less than an hour. It really is as simple as that appliances arrives at your offices, pre-configured, pre-installed. You enter 3 commands. Well, 1 command to initialize the node. It'll ask you for IP addresses, right? And then you enter the secondary command to initialize, to finalize the node, and then a 3rd command to initialize the cluster. And you do this for all 3 nodes. And then within, 32 minutes to an hour, you're ready to create your actual virtual machines. It really is that simple. And our support can do that for you remotely. And that's how we do give you or the customer that full package from a support perspective. Scalable. Can go from a single node to a 3-node cluster and up. Okay, we've got a very strict rule from not doing 2 nodes because we see 2 nodes as basically a replication, a copy of each other, and not a high available solution, right? We do single nodes, and we're the only HCI vendor that can do spin disk onlys, but we see that as basically a archival node or a backup node. We've got a node called a BRS node, Business Resiliency System, right? Or alternatively, you can just use it for long-term snapshotting, archival purposes. Really inexpensive, high-capacity disk type of solution, right? You can scale out seamlessly. As long as your first 3 nodes stays the same, and you can add nodes that's got any configuration, basically to your 3-node cluster and scale out until you've reached your cap of an 8-node cluster. And then a golden rule that we've still got, as long as it doesn't exceed the capacity of your current cluster that you've got, the storage capacity of your current node. And then affordability, you get the complete stack, all software included, all the functionalities and features. It's not like Nutanix or VMware or the other competitors out there. If you need a specific feature, you need to buy a higher end or a higher version of the software to get additional features, right? Nutanix, to use all flash, you have to go ultimate version. So you need to pay a lot more to go to the ultimate version. With scale computing, it doesn't matter where you buy the smallest little device or the higher end device, you get all those functionalities and features, right? Then I'm just going to jump into the actual stack that we have, the appliances. So I did touch on the world's smallest little appliance, and this is this little server, if you guys can see my video, right? Fits in the palm of my hand, the HU150. Great little server. So just want to touch on one of my customers busy in South Africa. Can't give too much details about them yet, but it's an MSP. So they're busy developing, or they actually developed a full-fledged hosted environment for their customers. So not only for the existing customers, but also for new customers using our REST API, they've developed a website where customers can actually purchase virtual machines on demand, right? Almost like an AWS type of model, and integrated with a scale computing type of, or the scale computing backend running these actual virtual machines, right? And thus approaching that type of MSP model. But also for their larger customers, or for customers that they already have, maybe they've got 5 or 6 virtual machines running at their small robo offices. They're going to deploy these small little clusters at those offices, and those little clusters are going to replicate back to their main clusters. And this is where they're going to use the HU150s, for instance, right? It's micro cluster, single CPU, i3, i5, or i7, can go up to 64 gigs of RAM per node, and up to 4 terabytes NVMe per node. Really nappy, really powerful little devices, and they can be clustered together also to provide larger capacities and high availability. Right, HE500 series, single socket servers, right? Also for the edge, for the robust sites, also little powerful servers, but not for your high-end type of workloads. Really good for the edge, right, or smaller type of customers. And then we've got our dual socket servers, 1U servers. Really not that high capacity storage, but really for the kind of the fog or core type of environments, but can also take 2 GPUs per node, and also full NVMe based systems. And then our really big boys, our 2U servers, right, can take up to 5 GPUs per box. really high capacity nodes, high capacity storage for those bigger, larger data requirement, high capacity deployments. And then the HE3 Google Cloud Unity for those type of scenarios where you need to do breakout in the cloud, or a disaster recovery in the cloud, or where there's services that you do require in the cloud, or some sort of cloud strategy for your customers. Right, I don't want to steal too much of William's thunder, so I'm going to give this over to William to quickly show you, because I can talk and talk and talk, but the product itself speaks for itself, and the simplicity thereof. Ian, William, sorry about that. Right, over to you, my friend.
Yes, thank you. I thought you were going to pull that slide up with the architecture.
Yeah, I see. I was talking so nicely that I actually used a lot more time than I planned.
All right, let's just dive into the demo then, because I don't have the slide at hand right here. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, let me quickly put it on. There we go.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think are really important in our product and how our product relates to the other products in the market in the hyper-converged infrastructure space right now is the fact that our architecture is significantly different from all the other architectures. So in this slide, what you see over here on the left hand of the slide is how the majority of our competitors are handling hyper-converged. What they have done is they've created a virtual machine. This virtual machine runs on top of the hypervisor that they are managing, and that virtual machine is binding all of the storage, network management, and the hypervisor into a hyper-converged solution. So in this example over here, you can see that where Jaco's pointer is right now, there is a virtual machine that is called a virtual storage appliance. This virtual storage appliance is a virtual machine. So actually it runs on top of the hypervisor. It's a virtual machine, and this virtual machine has management capabilities towards the hypervisor and has storage capabilities. And with those storage capabilities, it claims all the disks in a node and then creates centralized storage out of those disks. Basically, what they've done is they've taken existing technologies and glued them together within a set of virtual machines. And one of those virtual machines is required on every node in a cluster. In the right-hand example, what you see is our integrated hypervisor model, where we have integrated our storage smarts into the hypervisor, meaning that when you, for instance, on the left-hand side in a virtual machine that runs on top of the hypervisor, change a point into a comma, you would go from the virtual machine to the hypervisor, from the hypervisor to another virtual machine, from that other virtual machine to the storage kernel of the hypervisor, then to the disks, and then all the way back for your write commit. And in parallel to that, you would have to go over the physical network to another hypervisor where you communicate with the virtual machine that again communicates with the storage kernel of the hypervisor to get disks, data on the disks on the redundant location. In our case, on the right-hand side, since we have integrated the storage smarts into the hypervisor, we can write from the virtual machine directly to the storage kernel of the hypervisor and thus directly to the disks. Left-hand example takes approximately 36 steps to change a point into a comma. Right-hand model takes 12 steps to change a point into a comma. And keep in mind that every step is a CPU cycle, and every CPU cycle is a bit of latency. So having less steps in that cycle greatly reduces the latency. The second thing is a VSA, because it requires all the intelligence that is needed for all the solutions that it binds together, is quite a beefy virtual machine. So Nutanix actually does this the best. And in a Nutanix example, the smallest VSA that you can have needs 24 gigs of RAM. The worst one in the market, in my opinion, is HP SimpliVity, where a HP SimpliVity VSA actually requires 64 gigs of RAM. So in a 3-node cluster, that means you require 192 gigs of RAM only to start the solution. With that 192 virtual machine, 192 gigs of RAM, you do not have any virtual machines running yet, or the capacity to do so. So you actually need to buy a lot more RAM to get virtual machines running. And this is actually one of the victory points, to call them like that, that we had when we were competing against those parties in the bid for Ahold Delhaize. Jacco already told it. With Ahold Delhaize, we have, I think right now it's approximately 800 stores, where each store has its own cluster and can do its own smarts. By the way, over the last 2 years, they have had 0 downtime, so no problems whatsoever in that system. But the reason Ahold Delhaize chose for our systems was because with a Nutanix setup, if they wanted to use the smallest setup, they could use nodes with 32 gigs of RAM, and then 24 gigs of RAM would be consumed by the Nutanix solution. So per node, they would only have 8 gigs of RAM free for their virtual machines. In our case, since our system only uses 4 gig of RAM per node, so in a 3-node cluster, only 12 gigs of RAM, but because we only use 4 gigs of RAM per node, this means that in a 32 gig system, you still have 28 gigs of RAM free to run your VMs. So obviously we can manage very, very large systems, up to 1.5 terabytes of RAM in a node, etc., etc. But we, I think specifically our target market, we can also have extremely small systems. So here you see the example of a 32 gig RAM machine where you can only fit 1 6 gig RAM VM because of that 24 gig RAM requirement. If you take this a step further, if you take a look at the same example for an HC3 environment, you can see that you can run up to 4 virtual machines of that same size. So basically your density gets better, and it even gets better because right now in our roadmap we also have systems with 16 gigs and 8 gigs of RAM coming up. So literally going to be the smallest hyper-converged, fully high available solution in the market. So let's see, are there in chat any questions right now? I see one chat message that's just that we're going to start. Okay, so let me share my screen like this, and let's get on with the demo. Yep. So what you are looking at right here is a skill management interface. So let's start from the start. The word simplicity has already been mentioned a couple of times, but I think one of the most important things here is this solution has been designed with the fact in mind that somebody who's been working in IT for 3 to 6 months actually should automatically understand this solution and could be able to work with it. Like Jacco said, 118 VMware trainings that you can follow. And if you want to become a Nutanix specialist, you first have to become a VMware specialist before you can attempt to become a Nutanix specialist. So in our environments, we have basically, I think Jacco said we actually have 3 trainings that you can do right now. One of them is a sales training, one of them is an SE training. So if you want to become me, you need to do the SE training. And to be perfectly honest, both of those, you should be able to do the exam after this presentation. And we also have an additional training, which is a self-install training. Like Jacco said, with every node, we automatically include an installation service. So our support department actually, we actually have project managers that work together with our support department. Once a cluster is delivered, a phone-based installation service will automatically be included. Feedback that we got from our partners, but also from our MSP partners, is we want to be able to do those installations ourselves because we add the value to our customers. So new in our portfolio is a installation training. To be perfectly honest with you, that installation training, I think it covers 10 minutes of that entire training covers our installation. The rest of that 2-hour training is around networking and things like that. So actually things that have nothing to do with the skill cluster, but needs to be up and running before the skill cluster can work. So the installation itself, the last time I did it in Austria, I was there for 2 days, of which I spent 1.5 days skiing. So that's how difficult it is.
99% of the problems are related to networking.
Yeah, definitely. So second thing that I want to tell about this interface, not only is it very simple, but it runs in an HTML5 browser. You do not need additional applications. You do not need additional tools. You do not need any browser plugins. The browser plugins that I have are for different things. Basically, HTML5 is all that you need. Funny coincidence, that installation that I did in Austria, couple of months before that, I was also on a customer visit there for the sales discussion, and they had a power outage. So I actually did this entire demo that you're going to see right now on my mobile phone without any problems. So the fact that this is a completely HTML5 based environment means that you can do management with whatever you have at hand, as long as it has a browser, which basically is everything right nowadays. In the left-hand corner over here, we see the Scale logo, and next to it, we see the name and the version number on my cluster. You guys are in luck. I am running version 9, which is the version that's going to be released next. So actually what you're seeing right now is a bit of our roadmap presentation. You're also going to see features that are going to be released within a month. So I'm going to demonstrate them anyway, but be aware that some of the features that you're seeing right now might not be there yet. When we're talking about ease of management and how easy it is, I think our update is the most or the biggest proof that our solution is really, really simple. When an update is available, just like on your iPhone, you will get a notification saying an update is available. In the case of a skill cluster, a yellow text will appear just below the version number that will tell you an update is available. If you click on that, or you click on the version number, you go to the control center, to the update page, and then over here where you now see a big white plane, a short description will be what's in that update and a link to a longer description and the release notes of that update. On the far right hand side, you will see a button that says apply update, and when you click that button, from that moment on, everything in the process is automated. Now, I started out my IT career at Dell as a storage trainer. And one of the things with updates, if you're updating, let's say, for instance, a Nutanix environment on HP servers with VMware as a hypervisor. It's a common scenario. Let's take that one. What you first need to do is you need to start reading the hardware compatibility lists of the HP servers. You need to read the hardware compatibility list and the firmware compatibility list, of course, also of Nutanix. You need to read the compatibility list for VMware, and you need to find all the versions that are compatible with the entire stack. And then you can start doing your upgrade, but be aware that that upgrade needs to be performed in the right order, because if you screw up the order, you might end up with a bricked system or a system that right now won't run any virtual machines, which is maybe even worse. In a HC3 environment, like I said, everything is automated. We sell appliances, and the benefit of selling appliances is that we always know what the hardware below is. We have we create the storage mechanism, and we have created the hypervisor, or we've changed the hypervisor to suit our needs. So we know what the requirements from those components are. That means that our update is not only capable of updating the required software on the nodes, but also if a hardware update, like a BIOS upgrade, a controller upgrade, if it's a Lenovo-based server, X-Clarity server, or if it's a Dell-based server, the DRAC, every component can be updated by our update mechanism, and you no longer have the necessity to read all the HCLs. Secondly, our upgrade is a rolling upgrade. When you upgrade your iPhone, because that's the example that we started with, if you upgrade your iPhone, during the upgrade, you can't use your iPhone in a scale environment because it's a multi-node system. And because we do a rolling upgrade, all the VMs will always be live migrated to nodes that are currently not being upgraded. So you can continue to work with your virtual machines, and an upgrade does not hinder your regular normal day-to-day work. In other words, when you are an MSP, you're most likely a 24/7 company, but being a 24/7 company does not take away your ability to do an upgrade, because you can simply just do this during production time. If you're talking about maybe one of your customers that you are explaining this to, one of my German colleagues always jokingly says, skill computing, as a regular IT administrator, skill computing gives you back your weekend. You no longer have to do these things during the weekend. In the middle of the interface, the top middle of the interface, we see the resource consumption in CPU, RAM, disk, IOPS, and latency. And in the disk section, I can actually click on it for some additional information. So over here, you can see that I'm currently using 1.8 terabytes for my snapshot, 1.7 terabytes for my virtual machines. In the efficiency section, you can see that I'm consuming 2.6, or that's actually that I'm saving 2.6 terabytes by using deduplication. And in the provisioning tab, I can see that I've actually provisioned 30% more disk space, but since the virtual machines on this system are currently not consuming that, it's still freely available for all the other virtual machines. In this short introduction of the storage details, we've already seen three features, and one of the things that I always like to highlight here, I know that Jaco has also said it, but we're going to call this the power of repetition, is we don't do part licensing. So every feature is always included in a skill system. There is no advanced, basic, enterprise, enterprise plus with a golden edge and a feather in your hat. No, there's just a skill computing appliance, and it always does what a skill computing appliance does. On the right-hand side over here, we have the notification center. And as you can see, my cluster currently doesn't have any problems. If there is a problem, you can actually click on this, and then you'll go to the control center and then the conditions page, where a more detailed description is going to be of what's going on. Now, the top side of this interface is what we at Skill call the heads-up display. And the heads-up display shows me in one quick overview how healthy my system is. And you don't see anything amber except for the logout button over here. So I've got a very healthy system. As an MSP, you would most likely be managing more than one clusters, or maybe you have a disaster recovery as a service setup, and you want to see all your customer clusters to make sure that they are healthy. This is possible. If I go to the remote clusters section over here, you can see that I actually have 3 different clusters. I have a 4K cluster, which is, to be perfectly honest, a 11-year-old system that we no longer sell, but it still runs latest and greatest in operating system. I have a 150 cluster. I know that Jaco has shown it a couple of times, but I have one over here too. This is one of these 150s. It's actually basically an Intel NUC with an i7 and NVMe in there. I have actually 3 of them clustered in my network, and I have a Google Cloud environment. And as you can see, my Google Cloud environment has one notice, and if you look really closely, you can already see what's going on. But let's click on it. When you click on it, you will be redirected to that management page. I have to tell it I am me again, and here you can see that I'm running, actually I'm sitting in front of it, I need to do it like this, that I'm running out of storage capacity. But I can also click over here where you can see that same description, my free capacity is low. Let's take this one out. If you have a serious problem, so if over here you have something that is actually a bigger problem, a disk has failed, a network card has failed, whatever is happening, you're going to have to call our support department. Now, in the support area, I have exactly the same message. We only have one flavor, and that one flavor is 24/7, 365 24/7, 365 days a year. You can basically just click on support. The bottom link over here is the website with all of our telephone numbers on it. So we have many phone numbers in the region that you can use to call our support. And again, you can call our support 24/7. What we also have over here is a link to the partner portal. And in the partner portal, you can not only register your deals, which Jacco really appreciates. However, you can also manage and register your customer cases. So if one of your customers has an issue with their system, you can actually manage that service call for them. Last but least, I also have here the end user community, where you can find a lot of customers that might have already seen a problem or already had a problem and have a readily available solution for that. Once you are talking to a support engineer, you can they will usually ask you to open up a support tunnel. So in my control center, you will go to remote support, and in the remote support section, you can open up a connection. So our support engineer will give you a number. You put in that number over here and click on open connection, and then the cluster will make a connection with our support department. Not our support department with the cluster, no, the cluster makes the connection. So it's an outbound connection, and you don't need any inbound firewall rules for this. In other words, you are ensured that our support department cannot set up a session without you knowing it. By making use of this remote support tunnel, our support engineer can do his own diagnostics, and he can download his own log files. So our support engineers will never ask from an end user or from you, can you please download that and that file from that and that location and then upload it to my FTP or whatever. No, we can do that ourselves. So taking away that load from you. Once the service call is solved, a new disk has been sent, a new network card has been done, maybe a small software update has been done, you can simply just close this connection, and the connection will be severed between the cluster and our support department. That about support. One level below the heads-up display, you see these 3 blocks, which are representative for the nodes in my cluster. You can actually recognize them by the IP addresses that you have here. And maybe you've also noticed that I am connected to the first IP address in this range. This is not mandatory. In a scale environment, every node in a scale cluster is a full management entity, meaning we do not have a single point of failure for management. We do not have a single Prism server, a single vCenter server, etc., etc. No, if you have 8 nodes in a cluster, you have 8 management entities. On the right-hand side of this node, you can see that my nodes have 128 gigabytes or 126 gigabytes in there, and that I have between 65 and 75 gigs of RAM available in each node. And the blue lines that you see below here are representing the virtual machine. So if I hover over one of those blue lines, I can actually see that my virtual machine is running over there. I also have a disk overview, and in this disk overview, you can see that my system has a grand total of 8 disks, of which 6 are nearline SAS drives and 2 of them are SSDs. Now, since we are a hyper-converged solution, we manage all the storage. So from a hardware perspective, all of these disks are JBODs. They are single managed disk. There's no RAID, there's no whatever, no. We do all the storage management, and for redundancy, we do a write factor 2, which means that all data is always written on 2 disks in separate systems. Now, obviously, there is a performance difference between the nearline SAS drives and the SSDs, and we manage this per virtual hard drive. So if for this demo, I go to my domain controller over here, and I click on the devices tab, you see that I have 2 virtual hard drives. When I click on the more button over here, you see that on the top side, I have my device configuration, which, because the virtual machine is running, I can't change. In the middle, you see my allocated space and my grown space. So I can actually make the disk bigger in this interface. And on the bottom side, we see the hypercore auto tiering priority. Now, this hypercore auto tiering priority is the mechanism that we use to divide the data between the SSDs and the spinning disks in my system. When I set this to 0, all data will be written to spinning disk. When I set this to 11, all data will be written to SSD. When I set this somewhere in between, where 4 is the default, data will be written to SSD, but depending on the age of the data, how often the data is being used, but for example, also depending on other virtual hard drives with maybe a higher heat priority, that data will then be offloaded from the SSDs to the spinning disk. And this system makes it in such a way that the data that you're using often is on maybe a little bit more expensive but high speed disks, and the data that you're never using, that you're just keeping around for archiving or something like that, is on the slower but bigger disks. Now, with our memory configuration, with our CPU configuration, and with our disk configuration, we support a system that's called mix and match. And Jacco has already mentioned this, but again, to reiterate, we can mix and match different systems with different memory configurations, different CPU amounts and different CPU configurations, and with different disk configurations and different disk types with another. So you can, with a skill system, literally expand a hybrid system with an all NVMe system. You can expand a hybrid system with another hybrid system that's differently configured. You can expand with a disk-only system. We have many possibilities of mixing and matching within a system. So even if I were to replace these 3 machines, so let's say we all think 11 years is old enough and I want something newer, so I'm going to add 3 brand new NVMe systems, I can upgrade this one to the latest and greatest version so that everything is compatible, then add those 3 NVMe nodes to this cluster, slowly move all the virtual machines from my old systems to my new systems, and then delete the old systems. And in such a way, having a very easy way of doing lifecycle management. I even have one customer over here in the Netherlands. As you might have heard from my accent, I am Dutch. I have one customer over here in the Netherlands that did his initial purchase with the first server with 3 years of warranty, the second server with 4 years of warranty, and the third server with 5 years of warranty. And when the first server ran out of warranty, he bought a new system with 5 years of warranty. And in such a way, he can rotate these machines and never has to buy a full cluster again. So he can always spread his budgets. Last but not least, I'm going to skip the creation of a virtual machine because it's extremely easy. Just fill out the form and then 5 seconds later you have a new virtual machine. But let's take a close look at what's in a virtual machine. So again, we're going to my domain controller over here. Or actually, let's take one that's a little bit better in. No, let's stick with the domain controller. Let's do it like that. I'm going to make it viewable like that. So here you see my domain controller. The default view over here is the resource consumption. Just like you have on the top in the heads-up display, you see how much CPU, networking, IOPS, and disks I'm using here. In this same overview, I can also change this virtual machine. I can live migrate it to one of my other nodes. If it's not running, I can delete it. Obviously, I can't delete a running virtual machine. And I can create a quick clone and a quick snapshot. And keep in mind that for the clones and the snapshots, we actually use a VSS driver. So these clones and snapshots are application consistent. One button above, I have my console, and also the console. And I think this is important, is fully HTML5. So you don't need any other tools, not even for working with the console of a virtual machine. One button down here, I have my devices, where you can see the skill guest tools that I've actually mounted twice. I don't know why, but I've got the skill tools mounted twice. You see my 2 drives and the option to add a drive, add a network card, and change the boot order over here. Then the last option over here is our Snapshot Engine. And our Snapshot Engine is actually completely different from what you are used to with our competitors. So all of our competitors, including VMware with vSAN, including Hyper-V, for their virtualization, they are using an object-based file system. And an object-based file system brings 2 downsides with it. The big upside is you have less entities to manage. The big downside is if you write a file, then do a snapshot, and you change a block, you have to copy the entire object. Even if you do an allocate on write, in the background, you still have to copy the rest of that data to get the object complete. And when you're reading from your snapshots, you are actually reading all of the objects that have the data in there to see if there's any block changes in there. So also with reading, you're getting a lot of additional latency there. Because we have the hypervisor integrated model and we have created a block-based distributed file system for this, we do not have that overhead. And for that reason, and that reason alone, we support up to 5,000 snapshots per virtual machine with a retention time of 10 years without any big problems. Whereas if you were to do that with one of our competitors' solutions, you would most likely be crying because of the performance. In our case, you don't have that problem. So I actually created a schedule to handle these snapshots for me. And just to show you an example over here, I've got my gold schedule over here. If I click on the edit button, you see that I do a snapshot every hour, every day, and every week. And I have different retention times for that. So my hourly snapshot is being saved for 6 hours and then automatically deleted. My daily snapshot for 3 days and then automatically deleted. And my weekly schedule for a month and then automatically deleted. However, you see that I also have a so-called remote time frame over here, which is 1 day, 2 weeks, and half a year. And this is for our replication engine. And like I said, without any problems, we can make this longer. So I could actually say, you know what, let's do a year locally and let's do 10 years remotely. And as you can see, this is fully supported and will work. Just to make sure that you see that it actually works. If I put something in here that doesn't work, it will show amber here and it will not work. The only reason that I'm going to say cancel right here is you've already seen that I don't have enough space on my replica environment. So I'm going to say cancel because obviously snapshots do take space. On my domain controller over here, because I don't really believe in replication of domain controllers, I have a silver schedule, so one that's a little bit slower, but still does the same. And as you can see over here, I have 6 snapshots, 5 of them automatically made and 1 of them manual. And like I said, I also configure my replication over here. So as you can see over here, this virtual machine has a replication relationship with my cloud cluster. Couple of things that are really important over here. My snapshots are managed per disk, so per virtual machine and per disk, which means that I can also mount this disk to another system to do a file level recovery. One of our MSPs in Germany has actually created a system where he has a recovery virtual machine that he uses that has a website on it, and a customer can actually mount his own backup disk to that system, and then from that system read files back to do restores. So there's many things you can do that for you to do that, you would require to use our API. The big thing here is it looks like a backup schedule, but we've all learned that snapshots actually aren't backups. And that's true because a snapshot is depending on the original virtual machine. Same goes for replication. Replication also is by default not a backup, because if I delete information in the original virtual machine, you also delete that information in your replica. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been a replica. And that's the reason why we do this snapshot-based replication. The downside is it's always asynchronous. The upside is on both sides, I have the entire virtual machine and I have the snapshots available where I can take, for instance, a historical snapshot over here and mount this disk snapshot to another virtual machine for data recovery. So I can recover entire virtual machines and I can recover data from within a virtual machine. And in my book of solutions, if I can perform a recovery of a single file independent from the original one, I have a backup. If this is not enough for you, and if you also need to have application level recovery, so a single row in an SQL database or a single email in an Exchange environment, then we have a partnership with Acronis, where Acronis is capable of using our this one, yep, of using our snapshots to make agentless backups, but still be able to do a application level restore. And that brings us to the end of the demo and brings us to, are there any questions?